Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we're looking at the 10 game mark of the NHL. We're looking at every team at the 10 game mark, how the standings would have shaped up if everyone had played 10 games, and some stats that could help determine how these teams are looking for the future and will they make the playoffs or miss the playoffs. Definitely stay tuned for that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Talking channel. Before we get into this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all your support. We're known to without you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below and don't forget to comment down in the comment section below so we can all discuss today's video. So in today's video, we got a quick video here discussing the 10 game mark. Now, over the past couple of years, I've really delved into this a little bit, just going over how each team does it at 10 game mark and how important that is to how they finish off the season. Now, I've gone back 10 years, back to the 13-14 season, which I think was the first year with new realigned divisions. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm not looking at the shortened season or the postponed season from 1920 and 2021 seasons, because those ones were wonky because it was shortened season and there was one where no one ever finished the season. So I'm not including those two ones, but besides those two, I'm looking at the last 9 seasons besides those two and seeing how exactly the 10 game mark shaped how those teams went out making the playoffs. So basically, first I wanted to just tell you how the 10 game mark shaped up this year, and then I'll go over and see some of the historical things over the past couple of years. So basically, at 10 game mark, the Tampa Bay Lightning led the Atlantic with a 7-3-0 record. They were followed by the Florida Panthers at a 6-3-1 record, and the Toronto Maple Leafs with a 5-4-1 record. So those are 3 teams who have made it from the Atlantic. Then the 8-2-0 Capitals will have won the Metro Division, followed by the 8-2-0 Carolina Hurricanes and 7-2-1 Rangers. Those would have been the top 3 teams in the Metro. The 5-4-1 Columbus Blue Jackets and 5-4-1 New Jersey Devils will have been the 2 wildcard teams, 11 points. And teams out of the playoff spot would have been the 5-5-0 Ottawa Senators, the 4-5-1 Buffalo Sabres, Detroit Red Wings, Montreal Canadiens, and Boston Bruins. Then the 3-5-2 New York Islanders would have missed the playoffs, and the 2 Pennsylvania teams who were both at 3-6-1 with 7 points would have missed the playoffs as well. So that would have been the standings for the Eastern Conference. In the West, we would have had the Winnipeg Jets win the West with a 9-1-0 record with 18 points, followed by a 7-1-2 record Minnesota Wild and a 7-3-0 record Dallas Stars. Those would be the teams who made it from the Central. Then you have the Knights at 15 points with a 7-2-1 record, the 5-2-3 Canucks and the 5-3-2 Kings all make the playoffs as the top 3 teams in the Pacific. The 5-4-1 Kraken and the 5-4-1 Flames would have been the 2 wildcard teams, and they would have been followed by the 5-5-0 Avalanche, the 5-5-0 Blues, the 4-4-2 Ducks, and the 4-4-2 Utah franchise, as well as the 4-5-1 Oilers, the 3-6-1 Blackhawks, 3-6-1 Predators, and the 1-7-2 Sharks. Those would have been the standings out of the Western Conference. Now, just a couple of quick stats here tell you exactly how important the 10 game mark is for some of these teams. So over the past 9 years, so since 13-14 to 23-24, excluding those 2 shortened season and COVID postponed season, we saw 77 times a team finish this 10 game mark with a below 500 record. So that's 9 points or lower. So 77 times that happened over that time frame. Of those 77 teams who finished the 10 game mark with a below 500 record, only 16 made the playoffs. That was interesting. Now, there's always 1 or 2 who finish with a 9 points or lower who wind up making the playoffs at the end of the season, but it's not usually that many. So, interesting note there. And then on top of that, we went 1 point lower. So, teams who finished at the 10 game mark with an 8 points or lower record at the 10 game mark, that happened 56 times. So, it was a little bit lower than the 77 times teams finished with an under 500 record, but only 6 teams of those 56 wound up making the playoffs. That was the 13-14 New York Rangers and Philadelphia Flyers. That was the 15-16 Anaheim Ducks, the 16-17 Nashville Predators, and last year's Nashville Predators and Edmonton Oilers. So there are teams who start out with 8 points or lower at the 10 game mark who still wind up finding themselves in a playoff spot at the end of the year, but it's extremely unlikely. And most teams who start out that bad don't recover from that. So that's how important a slow start is to a team who could potentially miss the playoffs after a slow start. If you look at the exact opposite of that, if the team had 7+ wins over the past 9 years in that time frame, 54 times that happened. So 54 times at a 10 game mark, a team had 7 or more wins at the 10 game mark. Of those 54 teams, only 5 missed the playoffs. That was the 13-14 Toronto Maple Leafs, the 15-16 Montreal Canadiens, the 17-18 St. Louis Blues, the 21-22 Columbus Blue Jackets, and the 22-23 Buffalo Sabres. So it usually sometimes happens, but for the most part, if a team has 7+ wins at the 10-game mark, they wind up making the playoffs by the end of the season. So that's another interesting stat. And you have an average of about 11 teams per season who are in a playoff spot at the 10-game mark wind up finishing the season in the playoff spot. So we'll just go through some of these stats here and how it affects this year's standings at the 10-game mark. So if you look at the teams in the playoffs right now, you'd have Tampa, Florida, Toronto, Washington, Carolina, New York Rangers, Columbus, Jersey. And the West, you'd have Winnipeg, Minnesota, Dallas, Vegas, Vancouver, LA, Seattle, Calgary. Now, of those teams, the average of 5 of those teams would probably miss the playoffs, while 11 would continue on to make the playoffs. Now, it could be something like maybe only 10 or 9 make it, or maybe something like 12 or 13 who are in the playoffs right now make it. So just an average of that. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. If you had to give out 5 teams of those 16 I just mentioned who are in the playoffs by the 10-game mark, which 5 teams do you think would wind up missing the playoffs by the end of the season? Some more interesting stats here. So of those teams who hit 7+ wins at a 10-game mark, this year there were 8 teams at the 10-game mark who had 7+ wins. That was the Bolts, who had a 7-3-0 record. That was the Caps, who had an 8-2-0 record. The Canes, who also had an 8-2-0 record. The Rangers, who had a 7-2-1 record. The Stars, who had a 7-3-0 record. The Wild, who had a 7-1-2 record. The Jets, who had a 9-1-0 record. And the Knights, who had a 7-2-1 record. So those 8 teams to start out with at least 7 wins to start the season. Now, you can say 1 or maybe 2 of them wind up missing, but for the majority, that's a really good indication that those teams are very likely to make the playoffs this year. If you look at the lower end side of things, we saw 6 teams hit 8 points or lower this year, 11 teams hit 9 points or lower. So teams who are 8 points or lower this year at the 10-game mark was 1, the San Jose Sharks, with only 4 points. The Blackhawks and Predators, who both hit at 7 points. The Penguins and the Flyers, who both had 7 points. And the Islanders, who had 8 points. So 1, maybe 2 of those teams could wind up coming back from that, but usually at that point in time, if you have that many points, you don't make the playoffs. So could we see Penguins, Flyers, or Islanders miss the playoffs this year? And if we go 1 point ahead, we said 11 teams at 9 points, which means 5 other teams have 9 points at the 10-game mark. That's the Edmonton Oilers, who finished below 500 again at the 10-game mark. And then 4 Atlantic Division teams: Boston, Buffalo, Detroit, Montreal. So could we see Boston or Edmonton miss the playoffs? Now, Edmonton showed last year that a slow start will not keep them from the playoffs. But if they have another slow start again, will that keep them from the playoffs? We'll have to wait and see. So there's some interesting stats here. Like I said, 7+ wins at the 10-game mark almost guarantees you a playoff spot, while starting out with 8 points or lower or 9 points or lower at the 10-game mark is almost a death sentence, especially if you're 8 points or lower. So definitely, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this video down in the comment section below. How much emphasis do you put in the 10-game mark? Do you think it's most likely not really that important, or do you, like me, think that this is actually a very good indicator as to some trends that we could see teams make or miss the playoffs by the end of the season? Definitely let your guys' thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. So I'm talking for today. Until this video, if you'd like to subscribe down below. Thank you for all your support whenever without you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment down in the comment section below. So I'll listen to this video. I also have a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff. If that's going to check that out, the link down in the description below. And can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.